What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Redonkulous Gaming. Today we're going to talk a little Paladin and protection spec by going with the Necrolords. Necrolords is going to grant you a couple of things if you go that route. So quick shout out, first of all, to the signature ability. The signature ability is Fleshcraft. We've gone over this in prior videos, but if this is the first one you're watching, Fleshcraft is a baseline 20% absorption shield that gets placed on you, where 20% of your base health is converted to a shield, so you could be walking around with roughly 120% base health. You go ahead and you channel this ability, and as long as you finish that channel, it'll guarantee you 20%. Now, if you want to beef up the shield, then you're going to want to channel Fleshcraft near a corpse, or preferably near the corpse of an elite or a stronger enemy, because that is going to increase your likelihood of getting a shield up to 50% of your base health. So again, walking around with 150% base health is going to be phenomenal, especially as you go into boss fights. So Fleshcraft is a beefy option for really any tank, because it gives you a little extra zing in terms of your health pool, helps out your healers, and is going to make you feel a little bit more tanky. However, that shield is not going to last forever, and it's going to be gone relatively quickly, but it's better than a sharp stick in the eye. So Fleshcraft is the signature Covenant ability for Necrolords. Doesn't matter what class you're playing, if you're going Necrolord, you're going to get Fleshcraft. So quick shout out to Fleshcraft and all that it brings to the Paladin and every other spec. Now, as we look at what Paladins get, their class ability by joining the Necrolords, the ability is called Vanquisher's Hammer. And this is where you throw a hammer at your target. It's going to deal a percentage of your spell power as damage, and it's going to empower your next Word of Glory. When you cast Word of Glory, which is empowered, that is automatically going to trigger a Shield of the Righteous. So it's going to make you a bit more tanky if you're going to leverage Vanquisher's Hammer. So it gives you a flat-out damage increase, which turns into some healing throughput, which then turns into a Shield of the Righteous. And that's worth calling out. Now, obviously, depends on what spec you're in terms of the effect that you're getting. So for the sake of this video and what we're going to be talking about, this is strictly Protection Paladin. And we're going to talk about really three things as it relates to Vanquisher's Hammer. First, how does the ability feel? Is it something that's fun to play? Is it a button that we look forward to pushing? Is it something that adds to the overall class playability or functionality of the Necrolords for Protection Paladin? The next thing we look at is whether or not the ability is strong. Flat out, is it giving me extra throughput, extra damage mitigation? Is it something that is a strong ability for a lot of different content? And speaking of a lot of different content, we're going to look at the overall viability of Vanquisher's Hammer and try to answer, hey, is this going to let me do more than one thing, or is this something that may only be strong in dungeons, or may only be strong in raids, or is this just an ability I'd like to have in Torghast, but it doesn't really open up the rest of what it is that I'm trying to do in my gameplay experience? So let's go ahead and jump into it. First, how does the ability feel? How does Vanquisher's Hammer feel? So I will say that this ability is more rotational than anything else right now currently in the Paladin toolkit. And what I mean by that is that it's on a short cooldown. It is on a 30-second cooldown, and it becomes something that is just a button that you push as a part of your tanking rotation. The reason for that, and the reason why you're going to want to get it up as often as possible, is because the more you cast it, the more Word of Glory is going to be enhanced to automatically trigger a Shield of the Righteous. So as you're mashing Word of Glory and as you're kind of healing yourself to full, or whatever you're doing throughout the dungeon or throughout the raid, or fill in the blank, you're going to want to take advantage of the passive effect that you're getting whenever you cast Word of Glory. So it's going to give you a little extra mitigation in the form of Shield of the Righteous. And so as far as it being an ability that is fun to play, I would say it's not necessarily fun. It just becomes more rotational, and it's thematic. Now, this is also kind of nice because it's not something that requires health pool to be below 20% or something like that to cast. Vanquisher's Hammer can be cast at any target at any range of health. So as I mentioned, it truly does become rotational and less situational, and becomes a core part of your rotation and mitigation, as well as your overall healing throughput and your sustainability. So that's worth shouting out and kind of giving recognition to. In terms of how it fits into your toolkit, it's yet another button that you're going to be getting. And it's something that, as I mentioned, because it has become more rotational now, it is something that you don't necessarily need wings up to push. It's really an ability that you're going to want to mindlessly push on cooldown. And to me, any ability that becomes relatively mindless, unless it gives you an extra effect, is generally not too fun. Now, because this does give you an extra effect, and because it does kind of change the way that you're going to want to cast your Word of Glory, that changes the way that you're going to play and the way that you're going to approach certain pulls. So I think that's a relatively fun gameplay decision. Anytime you have to time things or align things to make it so that it might be perfect. Now, all that being said, there will be times in which the perfect situation does not exist every 30 seconds to line up a Word of Glory cast to take advantage of that Shield of the Righteous. So in that regard, it may feel a little more clunky, and you may feel as though it's not something that you necessarily need in your toolkit. But what I will say, as the overall difficulty of content starts to scale, this is something that's going to become more and more valuable as we go on. So as far as the overall strength of the ability, we started to kind of allude to it a little bit there. Having Word of Glory enhanced to trigger Shield of the Righteous automatically is going to be something that becomes relatively strong in terms of your tank kit. Having, and it's worth kind of also shouting out Fleshcraft here, because that's on a 2-minute cooldown. So having the combination of additional utility and sustainability in the form of your Word of Glory, which also triggers Shield of the Righteous, stack that on top of the ability Fleshcraft, you're going to be walking into some certain situations and you're going to feel a lot more tanky than you would if you were to go with a different Covenant ability. So I think that Necrolords is actually emerging as something that is pretty viable for Paladins who really kind of like the look and feel of the Necrolord Covenant, and so that's something that you may want to consider. The overall strength of the ability is only as strong as the content that you're doing. So early on, it's not going to feel as strong. It's just going to be, to you, like I said, more rotational and something that you're casting for the sake of doing extra damage, which Paladins are quite frankly doing a little bit more damage than the other tanks right now in beta. We'll see how that plays out, but they're definitely dealing the most damage, and therefore they're the easiest to hold threat with right now. But this is an ability that you're casting every 30 seconds, and that's only going to increase the damage done. What's nice about it is that even though it doesn't hit more than one target, and it does cost one holy power, the passive effect of triggering Shield of the Righteous is something that it doesn't matter how many targets that you're tanking, you're able to get that effect, and that's pretty darn cool. In terms of the overall viability of this skill, when we look at rating, and you think about, single target versus multi-target, what I would say is that the benefit that you're getting from this skill is something that scales whether you're talking a single target or multi-target. It looks like a good chunk of the fights, maybe up to half of the first raid, is actually going to have single target only fights. So an ability like Vanquisher's Hammer that it doesn't hit multiple enemies, and we use Divine Toll as kind of the setting the bar for what a Paladin Covenant ability should be. That's something that throws up to 5 shields given how many targets that you're taking. Well, an ability like Divine Toll now only turns into a single target cast, and so you're getting less out of that ability than you would be if you were fighting multiple targets. Whereas for this scales in the same way as if you're fighting one target, and if you're holding aggro on 5, 8 targets, whatever the number may be. So that's kind of nice to be able to have that passive effect, and because it does become more rotational, you're actually able to get that off at twice the clip that you would something like a Divine Toll, which has a 1-minute cooldown. So this is going to give you just kind of a little extra mitigation that you may not have had before, thanks to Shield of the Righteous. It's also going to make you want to pump that Word of Glory a little bit more freely and liberally than you may have if you were going to be rolling with another Covenant, but just keep in mind that the viability of this Covenant ability is only going to scale as much as you're willing to tweak your overall gameplay to maximize the effect that Word of Glory is going to have. So there it is in a nutshell. Quick little rundown. I would say that this is actually a pretty fun ability because it does have to change the way that you approach your gameplay from a pack-to-pack perspective. The strength is there. It certainly is at the point where it feels pretty strong in beta. It feels pretty balanced. And then it's pretty hard to decouple what Vanquisher's Hammer is bringing to the table in terms of the utility and the extra healing and ability to just kind of self-sustain, as well as the mitigation that it brings by triggering Shield of the Righteous. It's hard to decouple that from Fleshcraft, and being able to enhance your overall health pool once every 2 minutes is something that you can't necessarily sneeze at if you're primarily going to be tanking. What I would say is that if you're someone that is not going to just focus on protection, if you play protection as a main but you spend a lot of your time doing ret, or maybe you like healing in your off time, you may want to evaluate the Covenant skill because Word of Glory is going to function, not Word of Glory, but Vanquisher's Hammer is going to function different whether you're rolling Retribution or Holy. And to very quickly just kind of breeze through that, if you cast Vanquisher's Hammer, what you're empowering if you go ret is your Templar's Verdict, which is going to trigger Divine Storm automatically. So that's going to be an AoE increase as well as single target increase, because that's a passive effect. It's not anything that you have to push. And then if you're rolling Holy, it's going to empower your next Word of Glory to trigger Light of the Dawn. So you want to balance that with some of the other Covenant choices depending on how you're going to spend your time going off spec there. But let me know your thoughts below. But it does look like that Necrolords is shaking out to be a relatively strong choice for Paladins, and Paladins right now are in a pretty darn good spot in beta. So as long as they don't mess with them too much, they'll still be looking to be a very strong tank as we head into Shadowlands.